Okay. Um, so yes, thank you very much, obviously, for joining us today. For those on the session that haven't met me before, Alan Ryan, I'm the sales director and I look after the business across Europe. You may have received an invitation from some of my colleagues, Tony Yazbek, who heads up the Middle East, and Satyam Shet, who heads up our JPAC division. So we wanted to essentially run today's session because we're now, well, recently, I guess, released or starting to provide our new RMM 7.7. And there are, I guess, some significant changes, not only in terms of functionality, but also how we structure migration, disaster recovery workflows within the RMM itself. Um, I see a few familiar names, so I know some of you already very familiar with our existing solution. But one of, I guess, the biggest changes you'll see is around kind of host discovery is now effectively starting point for workflows within RMM. We've introduced features like bulk discovery along with host tagging, filtering. We've made changes on the auto provisioning. On the DR side, there's some important changes around kind of failover fallback. But yeah, look, the purpose of today's session is to give you guys an insight into the solution itself. We're seeing a lot of, you know, migration projects, I guess, becoming larger and more complex, and uh, the significant amount of activity now around VMware exits. We're also seeing customers move between public, private cloud, sovereign cloud environments, while at the same time, I guess, having to rethink disaster recovery architecture and what that looks like. So, a lot of the work that we're putting into this new release is making the RMM easier to operate at scale and giving customers and partners more control over, I guess, those migration and recovery workflows. Um, Now, we're going to talk through those changes in the product itself rather than just talking through slides. We'll demonstrate as well the new functionality, explain where it fits into the overall RMM workflow. Today's session is recorded, so we will be forwarding the recording to all the registrants. Um, Please, as well, we do want it to be somewhat interactive in that any questions at any time, please put it into the Q&A box. We will answer them as we go. And with that, on the session today as well, I have Akash Bamble, who's our technical director at RackWare. I have Ganesh, who's our principal cloud architect. So with that, I'll hand it over to Akash, and yeah, Akash will take us into the RMM 7.7.
Sure. Thanks, Alan, for the intro and setting the stage. Hi, all. Thank you for taking out the time today. This is our monthly partner training program, and we have been running it successfully for multiple months now. And we are seeing the results. It is becoming increasingly easier for you guys to start working on the use cases where Rackware is a fit. And today's session, as Alan mentioned, is going to be focused on what are the additions or different workflows that you can achieve using the 7.7 versions of RMM. Now, most of you guys who have already used RMM, it's the 7.4 version that we have out there, which is our GA release, and its UI has been there for years now. Now, over the past few years, our product management team, our engineering team, our customer interfacing team have been evaluating different workflows, which will make it easier for us to achieve the use cases that we see very often out there in the field, and how we can make it easier for you to achieve those, how we can make those granular, how we can avoid a lot of reconfigurations, how we can give you that flexibility to move across different use cases with ease, and to kind of manage things at one place rather than you keep on updating similar stuff at different places, instead of it just trying to give it more granular structure, giving it more atomicity, and at the same time mapping it to the use cases that we run into very often out there in the field. So again, the use cases that the software supports, assessment, any-to-any migration, disaster recovery, and backup, those use cases remain the same. So we are not adding any new use case as part of the 7.7 release. It is really the graphical user interface that has changed, and the way you would set up the workflows for these use cases has slightly changed. Again, there has been a lot of effort that went in to make sure that we kind of balance things instead of making it drastically different than what you would have as part of the 7.4. We have tried to balance it such that you are able to still map the terminologies, but at the same time, adding that flexibility which is needed on top of the 7.4 GUI that we have, and in fact, all our engineering team, our SE guys, we are also familiar with 7.4. So it's a big learning curve for us as well. But eventually it is the thing that we are going to start using, deploying in the field. So we thought of making use of this month's partner training to kind of introduce you guys to the 7.7 graphical user interface. And by virtue of that, give you a high level overview of the look and feel, how you configure things. So that's really the idea of this month's partner training. I hope at the end of this session, or by the end of this session, you will have fair enough idea about the new GUI. Of course, we don't expect you guys to be kind of getting used to it, just because you have attended this session. It is going to be hands-on for you guys as well. And as has been the case with 7.4, we will make sure that we handhold you through this process of moving to the new graphical user interface. And not just that, also we are working, we are putting in a lot of efforts in our documentation, so that the documentation also makes it very easy for you to look for the use case that you want to achieve and how to achieve it, or how to configure it on the UI. So with that said, let's start the session. So just a bit of a housekeeping. You guys may already be aware of this. Just to reiterate, for anything that you want to reach out to us for, any inquiries, any use cases that you think RackWare is a fit for, please reach out to us at info@rackwareinc.com or sales@rackwareinc.com. Our sales team, our pre-sales team will be in touch with you on immediate basis, and take the use cases forward and guide you on what we can do and what we cannot. Again, as Alan mentioned, for any questions that you have during the session, please feel free to drop those into the Q&A box. Ganesh, who is on the call, our principal cloud architect, will take care of any technical queries that you ask. Anything on the sales side, license side, Alan is here to help you with that. And of course, at the end of the session, if there are any unanswered questions or anything that you guys want me to elaborate more on, I'll be happy to answer those questions or take up specific points, as part of the last 10-20 minutes of our session today. All right. So the agenda today, as I mentioned, is more around the new graphical user interface. But before that, I'll start with our usual product overview, because those things, they don't change. Any new guys who are on the training today, I don't want kind of directly have them look at the new GUI without really understanding what the software does, what use cases it helps you address. So we will go through the product overview. We will cover the network topology, the usual stuff around the architecture, how it is deployed, what connectivity requirements are there, how you can use or you can achieve different use cases around networking. Then bulk discovery is the new stuff. So, with the new GUI, you now have capability to add multiple servers to discover in one go, configure assessment for them optionally. And from that point onwards, when you're doing this, the bulk discovery or adding a server to the RMM, that is really the initiation point. That is where you are really getting your servers into the system. And then, it's a flexible path for you to either move to a migration use case or a disaster recovery use case. We will then look at, if you would want to create a migration wave, how you can do that, and how you can even run the operations without needing to create a wave, because that is what the new GUI allows you to do, because everything is kind of centered around the host object itself rather than putting it into a wave. But like I said, we have tried to balance the existing 7.4 functionality, because that is really smooth to use. Today, when people are using the 7.4 GUI, the feedback is it is very easy to use because of the way you can really configure things, get started with the migration, look at the diagnostics. So we have tried best to really have that as part of the 7.7. And we will keep on any modifications that we do further to the 7.7 release. That aspect will always be behind the design that is being done. Then a capture wave. So we all know that a migration is a lift and shift. So the way the software handles it is using host sinks, which does not require you to capture an image. But for disaster recovery, the first step is for you to really capture a source server in the form of an image on the R. So we'll take a look at that aspect. Then how do you configure disaster recovery, right? So DR, as was in the 7.4, DR is still about creating a disaster recovery policy, creating those sync schedules, like wherein you specify the periodicities, RMM syncs being asynchronous. So those schedules is what drives the sync periodicity or the sync intervals from source to the DR side, thereby allowing you to protect your workloads based on your RPO RTO needs. But on top of that, we have added the DR failover groups. So these DR failover groups is what help you manage the servers that you want to fail over together or you want to fall back together. There are ways you can group together the servers as part of the failover. So you can make use of the tags, you can make use of the waves. There is a lot of flexibility. And what that does is it kind of decouples the servers from waves. So you can add servers to a failover group irrespective of what wave they belong. So that really makes it easier for you to create the failover group on the fly without worrying about reshuffling the servers. If at all you have started with not the right way of creating the wave. Maybe you have mixed together the workloads which don't need to fail over together. But then that is not a problem now because failover help you add that, handle that or address that. We have also introduced the concepts of tiers, boot delays. Now, with tiers within the failover group itself, you can decide, which servers to fail over first, which would be next in the sequence. And in fact, that is the prime idea behind failover. You can also add boot delays because you may want certain sequencing for the servers to boot up as part of the failover. So all of that can be controlled easily now by providing the required options as part of the failover configuration. Now, also as part of the new workflow, we have what is called as sync profiles. Now, with sync profiles, the idea is to allow you to configure all the sync options that you had in 7.4, but associate them with the source host rather than as part of the wave configuration or as the individual servers which were part of the wave that we used to do as part of 7.4. So sync profiles is a new bit which I'll touch base as part of our session today. Again, backup and retention. This is the same stuff that we had in the 7.4 or we have been having all along. How you configure it is also more or less the same. I'll still show you those screens just to make you familiar with that. Of course, after going through all of this, we'll also touch base on how you can reach out to us for any technical support or during the proof of concept, for any queries you have, or during the actual implementation. So this is all that I'm planning to cover today. These are in itself, if if you ask me, we can actually have individual sessions on each of these, kind of sections. But the idea is, as part of the 7.7, we first want to make you guys comfortable on what all it can do, right? Then and give you a fair bit of idea on how to do it. It is all about digging deeper as subsequent follow-up sessions where we will kind of select a topic and then dig deeper into it to make you more comfortable on those aspects. And of course we are open to feedback. If you have feedback on what the subsequent sessions should look like, what will make more sense, please feel free to reach out and we would be happy to incorporate those as part of our subsequent sessions. All right then. So at RackWare, we have got two solutions: RMM, RackWare Management Module, and Swift. So RMM allows you to address the use cases of assessment, any-to-any migration, disaster recovery and backup for Windows and Linux-based workloads, x86 architecture, infrastructure as a service. Similar use cases are supported for container-based workloads by our another solution called as Swift. So it is also any-to-any, just as RMM does for Windows and Linux-based workloads. Swift does the same cases or same use cases for container-based workloads. So again, The use cases are assessment, any-to-any migration, disaster recovery, and backup. Now, with assessment, the software connects to the source server at the guest OS level. So RMM's technology is file system based. We don't do anything at the hypervisor, hardware, or storage level. Everything happens at the guest OS level. So with assessment as well, the software requires key-based SSH access to the individual unique IP addresses of each of the source servers which are to be assessed. With that access in place, RMM then starts collecting the data from the source server by running the monitoring queries, or rather running the queries at intervals that you set as part of the monitoring configuration. So with that, the software will run queries, gather data, and store it locally on the RMM. So no data goes out. Nobody outside has access to the RMM instance, not even the RackWare team. So for each of the use cases that the software supports, we are very well supporting air gap deployments because that is actually the way the software has been designed, not to be accessed by outside world, or not having dependencies on outside world for the operations to happen. So same happens with assessment as well. The data stays local in customer's own account tenancy or their own production data, or their own production environment, depending on where the RMM is deployed. Now, on top of the collected data, RMM then runs analysis algorithms to present the data in a variety of ways to you. And that is what the assessment is all about. So we help you understand the dependencies between the workloads, like what all IP addresses your current server is talking to, the ports programs involved in communication, the probable direction of communication. So this can help you build that affinity map, identify the dependencies between the workloads so that you can better plan with them or configuring them as part of a DR. We also show you the average current and peak values for resources like CPU, memory, disk IOPS, network bandwidth. So when you review this information, it can help you make those right sizing decisions when moving to the target site. So you can make effective use of the storage, effective use of the bandwidth, as well as optimize your workload so that overall you are having a lean deployment, the things that you need and excluding what you don't. It will also show you all the applications which are installed on the source server, their version details. But please bear in mind, whatever assessment we are doing is at the OS level. We do have a lot of enhancements for the assessment bit which have been identified based on the feedback we are getting, and those will be part of our upcoming GA versions. So with the assessment done, the software can also show you the cloud estimates, cloud cost estimates. So if you would run resources of similar configuration into the target environment of your choice, what is the monthly cost that you will incur for these workloads? So apart from the technical aspects, you will also get to know about the pricing aspects of it. So that then gives you a complete view of, okay, if I'm going to move this into OCI, into Google Cloud, any other cloud, what is the monthly cost that I'll incur? The assessment data is visible to you here on the UI of the graphical user interface, and you can also generate and download reports in the form of CSVs. So you can then apply your own filters on top of the collected data to make more sense of the data as you see fit. So that's assessment. With assessment done, we also have an automated wave planning, which allows you to group together the workloads based on their dependencies. And then with those waves taken care of or created automatically, you then just take care of the prereqs, hit the play button, and we can get started with migrations. So with migration, RMM is a true any-to-any solution, agnostic of what your source environment is, what your destination is, or what applications you are running on the source. Our technology is file system based, and we are closely tied to the operating system versions and the file system types which are running on the source. So that is where our support matrix lies on the OS versions and the FS types. So long as your source servers fit our support matrix and other prereqs are met, we can help you lift and shift those workloads or configure disaster recovery and backup for those workloads into the destination environment of your choice. And again, migration as well as DR and backup is a true any-to-any. So any hypervisor on-premise to any hypervisor on-premise, any hypervisor on-premise to any cloud provider, different cloud providers, different regions within the same cloud, hybrid cloud strategy, as well as cloud repatriation. Physical servers as well. So physical to physical, physical to virtual, virtual to physical, virtual to virtual. All of these confluences across disparate environments. So you get a lot of flexibility to decide what environment you want to put into, or even change you know, uh, your technologies on the destination side, because you really don't need to now worry about where you are running your servers. RMM can help you move them anywhere you want. Now with DR and backup, we have a converged solution. So with disaster recovery, you create DR policies wherein you specify the intervals at which you would want to perform the delta sync. So RMM syncs are asynchronous, driven by the periodicities or the intervals that you configure in your DR policy. Once you do that, RMM then starts performing delta syncs from production to the DR site, and your servers are protected. Now, how you want your DR compute instances to be provisioned and when you want them to be provisioned, you get flexibility based on your RTO needs and the budget constraints. For that, the software allows you three different options, which is basically dynamic provisioning, pre-provisioned powered on, and pre-provisioned powered off. You have the flexibility to choose any of these options or go for mix and match depending on the type of workloads you have and what periodicities you want to protect them. With the DR policies configured, performing failover and fallback is just a click of a button on RMM's GUI. And we support performing fallback to restored as well as rebuild packets. Now with the backup, you can create retention policies. As part of those retention policies, you specify the short-term, long-term intervals, short-term, long-term windows with which you want to create or retain the image versions, which are basically incremental versions, backups. So you will have a base image, and then on top of it, incremental versions based on the DR policy configuration and the retention policies. So with these image versions now available, you can restore to the primary, restore to the destination. You can also do single file restore. So this can help you recover from malware and ransomware attacks. So these are the three use cases as have been with the product since the beginning: assessment, any-to-any migration, disaster recovery, and backup. Each of these use cases being a different type of license. So assessment licenses are different than migration. Those are different than DR and backup. We of course have different SKUs, different bundles. If you're more interested in knowing that, we can spend some time at the end of the call, or at the end of the training. Alan can spend 5 odd minutes to, kind of give you an overview of the different SKUs we have. We can cover that as well if needed. All right. So again, with migration, DR, and backup, we being true any to any, this slide basically talks about the environments that we support. And, I'm pretty sure we must have missed a few logos here. The idea is we support all the hyperscalers out there, all the hypervisors out there, as well as physical servers. So you can maybe running your current production on a public cloud or on a tier 2 cloud provider or some hypervisor on premise. RMM can help you migrate those interchangeably between these environments as and when needed without kind of giving you that vendor lock-in or headaches of vendor lock-in. RMM can easily help you move out of any environment, move into any environment at any given point of time based on your preferences. Like I said earlier, what is important to us is the operating system support. So as of today, we support Windows 2022, 7, 10. We start right from Windows 2008, 64-bit, right? We are also adding support for Windows 2025. We support Enterprise Linux 5.2 onwards. Again, there are versions of SUSE, Rocky, Alma, Debian, Ubuntu, Amazon Linux that we support. Now, all of these specific image versions are part of our guides, wherein you will be able to find out what all OS versions we support. Also, whenever we are working on any opportunity, we do request you to fill the migration questionnaire or a DR questionnaire, depending on the use case, so that we understand the requirements better and be able to guide you on the deployment as well as the scope aspects. So from RackWare's perspective, we always try our best to keep things in black and white, what we can do, what we cannot, so that we go into the opportunity with clarity on what is achievable. And if there are certain things that we need to set the right expectations on, we usually call it out upfront so that during the implementation, we all know what to expect, as the end result of the deployment that we had. So the RackWare team works very closely with you throughout the entire journey. All right now. So let's jump into the high level architecture when you're using RMM for any of the use cases that we just talked about. So this architecture remains the same irrespective of what your source environment is, what the destination is, or what applications you are running on the source. The left-hand side here is your current production. So these are your Windows or Linux-based virtual machines running on top of any hypervisor on premise, or virtual machines running on any cloud provider, or these can even be physical servers. Now, as we looked at in the previous slide, what is important to us is the operating system version and the file system type to fit our support matrix. Right-hand side here is the destination where you want these workloads to be either migrated or to be configured in DR and backup use case. Again, it can be any environment of your choice. The green box on the right-hand side is a Linux-based virtual machine on top of which RackWare Management Module, RMM, is running. Now, we are present in the marketplace for Oracle, Google, IBM VPC, Azure, DigitalOcean. For other environments, for deploying RMM, all we need is a Linux-based virtual machine running a supported operating system version, and with other prereqs met, the software can be installed on top of it like any other Linux-based installation. So it's very easy, straightforward for you to set up the RMM. And again, RMM runs on a standalone Linux virtual machine, so it is not deployed in a SaaS-based model. No data goes out. Nobody outside has access to the RMM instance, not even the RackWare team. So by design, we are fit for use cases which requires air-gapped deployments or where data security and sovereignty is of prime importance. The block storage that you see mounted on RMM is needed only in case of disaster recovery and backup use cases. It is not needed for lift and shift migration. Now, the RMM instance running here in the destination site must then have L3 connectivity with the individual unique IP addresses of each of the source servers which are to be migrated or configured in DR. So RMM talks to the source servers at the guest OS level without needing any access to the underlying hypervisor or the cloud provider where your source servers are. For Linux, RMM uses key-based passwordless SSH access either as a root or a non-root user. For Windows, a SSH MSI that comes with RMM must be installed to enable SSH connectivity from RMM to the source Windows machine. The only firewall room you need to open or firewall port you need to open is port 22 inbound from RMM's IP address. You don't need to open it to the entire. So with regards to the security policies, with regards to getting security clearance, it is pretty straightforward. And the way the software works, the way it is deployed, we have done projects across all the domains out there. So military, defense, healthcare, BFSIs, finance domains, banking domains, healthcare, all the domains that you can name. We have done projects for both migration, DR, and for those environments, or for those use cases. Now, with the connectivity in place and other prereqs met, we will then create waves on the RM. Now, this is where also there is a change in the way the 7.7 workflow is. The 7.4 workflow would require you to create waves, and then you either have them as a migration wave or a DR wave based on the goal that you have chosen, whether you are running a host sync, whether you are running staged syncs. That's how we used to do it during the 7.4 UI. Now, with the 7.7 UI, the entry point is a source server. So you add a server as a source server on the RMM. And then as part of adding that server, you specify what operation you would want to run. Whether you would want to perform a host sync, which is basically the use case mapped to lift and shift migration, or you would want to capture the image, like performing the stage syncs, which maps to the DR and backup use case. So it's very easy for you to associate those aspects right with the server that you are adding to the RM. And then, of course, you can convert it into waves as needed, but you can also perform the operations independent of. So with the source server details added on the RM, and of course, the auto provisioning environment configured or auto provisioning access configured so that RMM can create the target machines for you, basically taking care of all the prereqs. Once we kick off the migrations, RMM will SSH the source server, examine them to gather metadata information. So with this metadata information available and the right API access to the destination environment, RMM will make API calls to automatically provision the target machines for you, matching the source specifications. We call this as auto provisioning. It is available for a variety of environments. And for the environments for which we don't yet have auto provision support, we can definitely evaluate it on a case by case basis based on the business use case. And even without auto provisioning, we can migrate workloads or protect them into the environment because we also support existing system approach, which is basically pre-provisioned target machines. So you can make use of any native scripting mechanisms, Terraform, or whatever is comfortable to you to spin up the target machines. Because all RMM needs is a target server running a bare minimum OS similar to the source, basically OS version matching to the source, and storage sufficient enough to hold the data coming from the source. That is it. You don't need to format, create any partitions, install any applications, nothing is needed. With the server created and RMM having SSH access, RMM can just use it as a target to override everything from source onto the destination server. So both the approaches are supported. Auto provisioning, where RMM will automatically create the target machines by making API calls, and pre-provisioned workloads, where you create the target servers and RMM then uses them as target. So with the target servers now provisioned, RMM will boot them in RackWare's microkernel, which is like an intermediate operating system, then format the target server completely, creating layout same as that of the source. So your OS, boot, all local partitions on the source are recreated here on the target. With that done, RMM then starts reading the data live from the source servers and writes it to the target machines. Once all the data copy is complete, the software ensures target has the right set of drivers, boot configurations, so that it can boot a fine on the destination hardware and then reboot it into the OS. So this is where your first full migration is now complete. Your target servers are the replica of your source servers, except for the network properties and drivers. Network properties are driven by the landing zone configuration. So whatever VCN subnet network you have here, target machines will get an IP address from that environment or from that landing zone configuration, and RMM will retain it. RMM does not override the network properties from source to the target. So with the first full migration done, application owners can now log in, perform their set of validations, and we can then resume Delta syncs. So after the first full migration, whenever we are running a sync, it is always Delta. RMM will compute Delta changes on the source, copy over the Delta, and write it to the target machines. We recommend that you run multiple Delta syncs as frequently as possible till the final cutover. This helps us in identifying the average sync times so that we plan the cutover downtime window accordingly, and also helps to keep the delta smaller so that final delta syncs are fast. Now, during the cutover window, application owners will query the applications on source. We will perform the final delta sync using RMM. Source servers can then be shut down or disconnected from the network. Necessary network infra side of changes can be made here. And once that is done, your servers will start acting as production. And we have completed a successful cutover. So that's the lift and shift migration workflow. Your first full migration, all subsequent Delta syncs are live. So there is no downtime to your production, no reboots required. The only downtime is the planned cutover window because we need the last known boot state of the source server to be replicated to destination before you start using it as a production. Now with disaster recovery, the same architecture applies. The same set of prereqs apply. So with regards to configuring things as prereqs and setting things up, it's the same. The only difference is in workflow. So for lift and shift migration, we make use of host syncs, which does not store any data on the RMM itself. Whereas for disaster recovery and backup, we make use of staged syncs, where RMM will first capture the source server in the form of an image and store it on top of the block storage, which is mounted on the RMM. So for every source server that is being protected on the RMM, RMM will create a corresponding image here, and the data copy will first happen from production to that image. The first time data copy includes all the used data from the source. So your OS boot, all local partitions, data, config applications on top of the OS, all of that used data gets copied. Subsequent syncs are delta syncs. So the delta data computed across the file systems on the source is copied and overwritten on this image. So at any given point in time for disaster recovery, you will end up with one single image, which is the replica of your source server based on when the sync was last performed with the source. The delta syncs happening from production to the image are called as stage 1 sync. These are then followed by a stage 2 sync, which copies the data from image to the DR compute instances. Now, by virtue of the auto provisioning capability, the software allows you to decide how you want your DR compute instances to be provisioned or configured as part of the DR set in the landing zone. So there are three ways you can decide this. So you can go for dynamic provisioning, where your DR compute instances are provisioned only when you initiate the failover. So this helps you save a lot of cost because in steady state, you don't have any compute instances running in the DR side, but may also result in longer RTOs because everything needs to happen when you initiate the failover, right? From provisioning the instance, copying all the used data, making sure the server can boot, running any post scripts, all of this must happen after you initiate the failover. So depending on the data size, number of servers we are failing over, and what bandwidth we have, this can take its own. So for the workloads for which longer RTOs are permissible or RTO is not a concern, dynamic provisioning can be used to save on the cost. Then we also have pre-provisioned powered on, where your DR compute instances are provisioned and up and running in the DR side day one. So that gives you the best RTOs. Your server is available to you unless in a sync cycle. And then pre-provisioned powered off, which kind of gives you the best of both worlds. So in this case, you get to save the cost because your DR compute instance, although pre-provisioned, are not always up and running. Those are running only for the stage 2 sync duration. And the periodicity of the stage 2 syncs is determined by the stage 2 DR policy. Like you can perform it once in a day, once in a week, once in a month, or whatever interval you want based on the RTO requirements. So that gives you the flexibility to kind of manage your cost or restrict your cost in the DR side, plus also give you the flexibility to manage the RTO needs. And failover in case of pre-provision powered off is all about powering on the target instance, performing delta sync with it, and powering it off again. And everything is automated by RMM for the environments for which auto provision support is there. So pre-provision powered off helps you kind of balance your cost as well as your RTO. So depending on what RPO RTO you want to achieve and what your budget constraints are, you can choose one of the options, or you can even go for a mix and match. Now, what option you choose here is not going to impact your RackWare licensing cost. So once you have decided how you want your DR compute instances to be provisioned, we then create DR policies on the RMM. So RMM syncs are asynchronous, driven by the periodicity or the intervals that are configured in the DR policy. So once you create the DR policy, all the servers which are part of that policy start syncing with the set periodicity, and your servers are now protected. Now, whenever you would want to perform failover, you basically prior to that, you add servers to a failover group, and you can also define different schedules as part of the DR policy. So you can run a stage 1 sync with a different schedule compared to running the stage 2 sync, which was earlier not available as part of the 7.4 GUI. So again, I'll touch base on it when we take a look at the GUI. Then performing failover and fallback is just a click of a button on our GUI. When you initiate the failover, software ensures target has the right set of drivers, boot configurations, has all the data needed based on the image, and calls it as failover complete. Other team members must then jump in and perform their set of tasks as identified in the DR run. After you have used your workloads from the DR side for some time, the software also allows you to perform fallback, again without needing any modification in the architecture, no additional prereqs. With fallback, RMM will bring the data from your DR compute instances back to your production. And we support doing fallback to restore as well as rebuild back. So that's the architecture overview for and the workflow overview when you're using RMM for the DR use cases. We first looked at the migration use case as well. And again, the first time full replication, subsequent syncs are live. So there is no downtime to the production, no reports required. All right. So I hope going through these slides, you have got an idea of the use cases the software supports and how it does it, right? So now let's jump onto the UI aspects of it, the new graphical user interface that we have, the new UI that we have. Let's start the journey to the new graphical user interface. Let me quickly refresh my environment here. Okay. Okay. Start screen sharing. Okay. So again, deploying the RMM is the same way. So when you are spinning up the RMM instance, you can, all you need is a virtual machine on which you can install the software. Of course, the installer for 7.7 version is different than the 7.4 version. We are also in the process of uploading the 7.7 version to the marketplaces where we are available, like Oracle, Google, IBM, VPC, Azure. So once we are through that process, you will also find the 7.7 versions in marketplaces. But even today, you can deploy 7.7. All we need is a RMM, a virtual machine on which RMM can be installed. So once you do that, this is the dashboard that you get for the RMM. So here in OCI, I have deployed my RMM. Again, I spin up an instance, I installed the software on top of it. Then for accessing it, I can SSH to its IP address. I'm making use of public IPs because I don't have private connectivity to my OCI account, and even between my two environments that I'm going to show you for the migration perspective, like from my lab to OCI. But for all practical production purposes, you don't need any public IP on the RM for operations to be run. So for accessing the UI, I just use the IP address of the RMM, so 180.86. When I type that in, I'm asked for credentials that I set up as part of the installation process. And then once you do that, this is the dashboard landing page that you get, which will give you a summary of how many waves you have, how many hosts you have, what images you have, how many DR policies, backup policies, and failover groups you have got. It will also show you the licensing details here, the number of operations that were run, how many completed, failed, and also the RMM, details, like what RMM version you have got. So it's very easy for you to really figure out your, current state of deployment with respect to RMM on this dashboard. The next is the hosts table and this hosts panel, and this is where now we really are at the entry point for the new graphical user interface. So like I explained earlier, the new graphical user interface is all kind of built around the host object, which is basically your source and target servers, whether you would want to migrate them or configure in DR and use case. So for adding a source server, you can add the source server one by one. So you go to add specific host. Again, most of these inputs are the same as we used to provide as part of 7.4. So you provide a friendly name to your server so that you identify it on the RMM, the IP address, which is reachable from RMM and on which the prereqs have been configured, what operating system you have, whether it's a Linux or a Windows machine, which port and user has been configured for SSH. So this is part of the prereq setup. Now the target config, whether you just want to add the source server for now, or you don't want to set the target machine because maybe you are just looking for capturing the server, right? So you don't really want to worry about the target for now. So when you don't want to configure anything for the target server, your sync type will be by default stage 1. But let's say you are looking for a migration use case for this server. Then you will either use auto provision capability of RMM or you will create a target server of your own. So if you select auto provision, which is where RMM will create the target machines for you. You then need to provide additional information like what is the cloud user using which RMM will make those API calls for creating the target machine automatically. Again, the cloud user auto provisioning concept, it is the same as we had in 7.4. The inputs which are needed for adding a cloud user stay the same. Nothing changes there. It is just that instead of providing the auto provision configuration at the wave level, which is how we used to do it in 7.4, you are now providing it at the server level itself. So you specify the cloud user that you have already added, the friendly name with which you want the target server to be created, what provisioning type you want. So whether you want the server to be pre-provisioned, so right away RMM will create the target machine and sync the data to it, or you want to use dynamic provisioning, where you initiate the failover and then RMM provisions the instance. So you can decide from here itself whether you want a hot DR, warm DR, or a cool DR. Then the sync type is about whether you want to perform a staged sync, or you want to perform, let's say stage 1 and 2, or whether you want to perform a host sync. So you fill in all these details, click on add, and your server will be added on the RMM, and it will also go ahead and discover the server. So when you add the server itself, RMM is performing the base discovery against that particular server. So this is different from assessment. Remember, this is not assessment when you're doing it from here. When you're adding the server here, the workflow that I explained, it is about a base discovery where it will fetch the details of the source server. And as part of it, it will also help you make sure that the connectivity and SSH prereqs are configured correctly. So you just cancel it. Another way to do that is you download this template, which is basically, again, a bulk discover template, wherein you specify or enter details for all the servers that you want to add to the RMM in one go. So this you can map to similar to adding the wave using a wave creation template, right? So on similar lines, the only thing is here we are specifying the servers that we want to add as part of the RM. Now, again, for this demo purpose, I'm just using one single server, but when you are actually doing bulk discovery, you will have multiple servers that you want to add to the RMM. What is there? And again, each of the headers here correspond to the fields on the UI, and you have got a lot of tags. You can reach out to our support team for the column headers that you can add here, so that you just do it in one go and you really don't need to update anything on the UI later. So you specify the IP address of the source, its friendly name, user configured for SSH, the target name that you want to provide, whether it's a Linux or a Windows machine. And I want the server to be pre-provisioned, right? So created during the replication or migration process itself. You can use dynamic provisioning here. So there are tags and inputs which are documented. Then the cloud user with which you want to perform the replications or auto provisioning using that RMM will use. What type of sync you use, direct, stage 1, stage 2, or stage 1, 2, and the host tag. So this is a new thing. With tags, RMM allows you to associate workloads to a similar group. And then based on these tags, you can filter your servers at multiple places. So when you're creating a wave, adding it to a DR policy, you can make use of these tags to, to kind of group servers or make or apply operations on group as required at multiple places. So this is a very useful feature that we have added. And you can have multiple tags as well. So with this template created and filled out, what you really need to do then is on the UI, just do a drag and drop of the template, just as we did in the earlier UI. So RMM will ask you for a confirmation. It will validate the inputs that you have provided as part of the template. And once you say it's all okay, you click on add host. And RMM will then take you to the bulk discover tab or bulk discover panel, where it will show you this your bulk discover operation. Like for me, it's just one single server that we are discovering now, and the details of the state, like what state it is. It's currently discovering. It is yet to finish. So you will find these details here. Now here in the state, where you can apply the filters. So if you want to filter the servers which are currently in discovering, which have failed, or which have been discovered successfully, you can do that. And then also under the actions panel, you can edit specific server for additional inputs. You can retry a failed sync from here, or you can simply delete it. So this one is now successfully complete. So if we go back to the source server here, so now our source server is being listed here. Click on it. So you will see a lot of information about this server, which we were not showing on the earlier 7.4 GUI. Of course, we also have the data as part of 7.4 RMM, but it was just the way we were representing the data. Right now, because 7.7 also focuses on assessment capabilities through the GUI, we are providing all of the information that we fetch from the source and target here on the GUI itself for you to consume. So when we look at the details for a particular server, you will find details like what is its friendly name, its IP address, the user, port. We have configured auto provision as the environment. So RMM will make API calls using this cloud user. This will be our target name when the target gets provisioned here in OCI. We want pre-provisioning model. So as part of the first time migration itself, RMM should create the target. And we are doing a direct sync because we want to do a lift and shift migration use case. Our server is a Linux machine, 7.9, because RMM has already done the examine, it has this data. Now the tags that I added, like this is my application A, it has got IP 97, or my application A, I've just tagged it as 97, right? So I can add any tag as required, and it can then help me filter out the servers as and when needed. You can add tags optionally from here. You can edit and add tags as required. Now below this, you will find a multiple of kind of panels or information panels in here. Now the system tab is where you will find all the hardware properties associated with your server. Now, some of this information is only available when we have configured assessment. Now, how do you configure assessment? For that, we need to go to the configuration tab. Under configuration tab, you have monitoring and analysis. So analysis is what we need to enable, and with it, the monitoring gets enabled by default. So once we save these changes, RMM configures the assessment on the source server, and it will now start collecting the data from the source server in a periodic manner so that we are able to see the details here, which the assessment bit says. So in few minutes, when RMM starts collecting the data, we will start seeing these being populated. But basically, the information that we see here as part of the source server details is what is the environment on which it is running. It's a BIOS-based workload. It has got one interface. These are the disk details associated with the source server, along with details on specific disks, its size, its sector size. If there are any remote attached disks, those will be shown here. Then the file system information. Like all the information about the source file systems is available here, use space, free space, the volume types, the logical volumes, because this is a Linux machine. So you'll find all of this information as part of the file system data here. Then also the network information. My servers are running on VMware. The source server is running on VMware, and it has got a DHCP configuration. So that's the configuration that it is showing. It will also show you in use ports. Once the assessment gets configured and it starts collecting the data, you will start seeing the in-use ports on the server here, TCP and UDP ports. That's the system tab. We move on to the sync config tab. Now, sync config is basically the same options that you used to provide as part of your sync options under wave. So when you used to go and individually edit a wave for a server, there were variety of options that you had. Like I want to include a file system, I want to exclude a file system, I want to configure event scripts. Those are the same configurations that you have here under the sync config. So you can modify these if you really don't want to go for specific sync profiles, and we'll cover the sync profiles later. So sync config are the basic sync options that you want to apply as part of the sync operation. The next is sync profile. Now, as part of sync profile, you can specify the options or the sync flags that you want RMM to run when it is performing the sync for which you had configured the profile. For example, how you create it is you give your profile a name. So let's say this is my app A and a sync profile for stage 1. So whenever a stage 1 sync is run for this particular server, I want these options to be selected. So again, I'll have to go for stage 1 here. But in the dropdown, you can see you can create a profile for a stage 1 sync, a stage 2 sync, stage 1, 2, or a direct sync. So now in this workflow, you are getting the flexibility what sync options you want to tie with a specific sync workflow. Earlier, whatever sync options you were selecting were getting applied irrespective of what goal you are choosing, right? So whatever is the goal, the sync options you have configured will take place or will take effect. Here, you can choose different options for different sync types. So the same server which is undergoing sync 1 may have different sync options. The same server, when it runs a stage 2, it will have different sync options. So you now get a lot of flexibility. Plus, when you're doing a failover and a fallback, you can have different sync profiles because the options that you are maybe using for failover may not be applicable for fallback, or during fallback, because of the environment that you are using, you may want to choose different fallback sync options. So all of that is possible because now you are able to create sync profiles and associate those sync profiles with the server. So this is a very powerful feature which allows you or gives you the flexibility of deciding what sync options you need, right? So I'll just make it as stage 1 only. I'll just leave everything untouched and just click save. So our stage 1 sync profile will be created and it will be shown to us here on the UI itself. Just let it refresh. It is already created. Let us move to a new tab. Here's fresh. Let me just read it here. Right, let's go back to our host, source host. Go inside that host. And here in sync profile, we now have the stage 1 sync profile that we just created. Now I also want to have a different profile for my stage 2. So I select stage 2 and I then give it a name like app A sync profile for S2, right? So I can then choose different options which are applicable for stage 2 syncs, right? Again, I'll just leave them as it is, click on save, and my stage 2 sync policy, sync profile will be created. So now I've got 2 sync profiles which are associated with the wave, but till the time I select a specific sync profile when I'm doing a migration or a DR, it won't take into effect. It will be associated, but it won't take into effect. The default will keep on taking effect unless you explicitly provide those. Then the auto provision config. So earlier, the auto provision config was more of a wave property. So we used to configure the auto provision settings at wave level, and then all the servers which were part of that wave would inherit the auto provision config. But now you can configure the auto provision environment specifically at the server level. So you click on edit. Now we had already provided the cloud user as part of our template. So we have the cloud user selected. Please bear in mind, all the options here are the same as we used to have in earlier versions as well. So we can select the region. The region for me is US East #11. My availability domain is 83. I don't need a fault domain. And I can again make use of names or OCI IDs because my destination is OCI. If my destination would have been Google Cloud, there would have been different options. So I'm just using OCI as a destination for the sake of demo today. But the same workflow, same configurations or setup is applicable for other environments as well, which RMM supports for auto provisioning. Now you can filter the values by your compartment. So if I've got my compartment as demo02DR, then I'll get the list of VCNs which are available to me over there. So I've got just one VCN in there, a single subnet, and the compartment where I want the instance to be provisioned. So I want them to be provisioned under demo02DR compartment. So I provide all of these inputs and click on save. So just as the auto provision environment used to get associated with a wave, now our auto provision config has got associated with my source server. Now apps tab will show you all the applications which are running along with their versions. This is part of the assessment. Now analysis. Now you'll start seeing analysis data because we enabled the analysis flag here, right? So now RMM has run a sample collection against the source server, and it is showing us data based on the samples that it has collected so far. Now, as more and more samples get collected, this data will keep on updating, and you will, it will start building up fine, building up beautifully with regards to the data that you would want to consume. So under analysis, you will get a view of average current and peak values for variety of resources, CPU, memory, disk IOPS, network bandwidth. This is where you can review the data and then make use of this data for the right sizing considerations. Then dependency. This is where the software shows you what all IP address the current server is talking to, their probable direction of communication, ports, programs involved in communication. So if I select a particular connection, it shows me this is a 22 SSH connection. coming from this particular server onto my machine, right? So you'll find all of these details here, as well as you will find it in a tabular format below. And again, when we generate the reports, all of this information is part of the reports as well. Now, the history tab will show us the operations that we have done. First time discover we did, and then we enabled the monitoring. So those are the two operations that we ran. So it gives you details on that. And configuration, of course, we looked at enabling monitoring, enabling analysis, then the intervals at which you want to, gather the data, how many entries you want to keep. So all of this is controllable from the configuration tab. Anytime you want to disable analysis assessment, just disable analysis and you are done. So that's the information that the software is showing you now today as part of the GUI itself, which was earlier not there as part of the 7.4 GUI. Now, once we have done all the configurations we need associated with this particular server, then there are two ways we can then proceed with subsequent operations. One, the old way, we go to the Waves tab, we click on Add Wave, and now here we select the server that we want to either migrate or configure DR based on the goal that we have used, right? And the profile that we are going to associate. So you give your wave a name. So let's say this is my app A wave. And now here, there are various filters that can help you. So if you've got a lot of servers added to the RMM, these filters really come in handy for you to kind of, quickly search for look for the servers that you're looking for. For example, tags. If you recall, I had added an app A97 tag to my server. So if I add a tag, let's say wave one app A97. So if I filter on that, all servers having that tag will be displayed here, and then you can just select them all and put it in a wave. So that's how easy it becomes for you to build waves using the tags that you have added as part of the discovery. So this is a very useful feature when you want to do things at a bulk level. And of course, there are other tags as well, depending on the sync types you want to perform or the target types that you want. You can do these filters. So I'll just select our server. I'll just click on add. So now our server has been added to a wave. If we go into app A wave, here you can change the name of the wave. And of course, you can specify the parallel counts as it was earlier. But now at the wave level, you will find very less options compared to the 7.4. Because again, like I said, we have moved those options away from the wave onto the source server. So if you go to the Actions Edit tab, now the only option you get here is choosing the sync profile. Now there is a stage one, stage two, but we are going to do a migration. So I don't want to select any of these profiles. I want to just let it be with the default. Again, you have got a systems tab here, the image tab here, the history tab, just as we had with the earlier versions. So you specify all of these details, you hit the play button like the old way of performing syncs. Other is you just go to the source server here under host source, and here you have got now this option, which is basically run the sync. So this Thunderbolt or bold option is what allows you to perform the sync right from this page. And here as well, you can decide. And again, these configurations are coming from the details that you have filled out. You can choose a profile. You can also select the advanced sync option based on the sync type that is there. So direct sync allows you for these many advanced sync options. If it would have been a staged sync, then the advanced sync options would have changed, right? So you select this and then you hit the sync button. RMM will start performing the sync. When you trigger the sync from here, in order for you to check the status of the sync, you must go to the history tab, and there you will find the details of the operation that are running. If we do it through the waves, so if I go in here, go to my app A, and I just hit the play button, I say start, RMM will now first examine the source server, gather metadata information from it, so the same workflow as earlier. And then with the metadata information available, it will start creating the target machine for us on Oracle Cloud, just as the auto provisioning would do in the earlier workflow, and then copy all the data. So what happens behind the scene, the sync mechanism remains the same for lift and shift migration as well as for the disaster recovery. So after the examine is complete, it has now gone on to auto provisioning. So if we go in here and refresh, you can now see Labyrinth TGT. RMM was provisioning that workload. You can see here, Labyrinth TGT. This is the name with which we wanted RMM to create the target server. So it is creating the server with that name. Once that server is provisioned, RMM will then boot it in microkernel, format it, copy all the data, and perform the sync. We'll again get to know all of these details here on the UI. Again, the same thing, the job IDs are there, which associate any workflow with the operation that is being done. And if you click on this eye icon, you will see further details, including the by job ID log file and other stuff, right? So a lot of diagnostics available to you. Now, why this is happening, let's take a look at the disaster recovery work. So if we go to the DR policy, in here, you get to create a policy. So again, your policy will have a name. So let's say this is my app A, and this is for my, I'll just call it app A for now. Now again, parallel count is how many servers within that wave will be synced in parallel. So depending on how many servers you are having, you need to carefully select this parallel count option. You can configure the start time for your policy. You can give, or you can create different schedules now, right? So a schedule is the interval or the periodicity with which you want to perform the sync. Now, like I mentioned earlier, in the 7.4 version, you would create a DR policy with a specific schedule, and that would then get applied to all the servers which are part of the wave. And the servers will sync with those periodicity. So if you would select a stage 1, 2, and create a policy to run every 1 hour, so a stage 1 sync will be performed, followed by a stage 2, an interval of an hour, and then again triggering the sync. So with this new workflow, what we are allowing you to do is create different schedules for different stage syncs. So if you want a stage 1 sync to run every 30 minutes, while a stage 2 sync to run every 4 hours, you can create two different schedules. So let's say I create a schedule here which says uh, S1, and I want it to be every 30 minutes. I do it by frequency. Again, all of these options are the same. So you can do it by schedule, by frequency. So you select minutes here as 30. You can associate the sync profile. So we had created a sync profile which was for stage 1 sync only. So if you want to associate it, you can associate that profile. I'll just leave it as it is. Again, the same options. You can configure notification emails. You can, kind of specify who needs to be notified and click on create. So now your DR policy is created with with that one schedule that we added, right? So this was one schedule that we had. Now let's say I also want to add a schedule for my stage 2 because I want stage 1 and stage 2 to happen independently. So what I'll do is I'll create a S2 which does every 4 hours. And again, I go to frequency, and instead of minutes, I select hours here, and I want to run it every 4 hours. Again, associate a sync profile that I want to run only for the stage 2. Click on add. So now you see what flexibility you are getting here. You are able to run your stage 1 sync at a different interval, stage 2 sync at a different interval, and that really helps you manage your RPO and RTO needs better. Now, the applied host, so for adding a host to a DR policy, you go here and just click on add host, right? Add a specific host. Now, you won't find any server being listed here because the only server that we have added is currently undergoing direct sync. For DR and backup, as I explained in the architecture workflow, you must always configure staged syncs. Now, because we don't have any server configured with staged sync, we don't have any server listed here. But once we change it from the server configuration, we change the goal, we will be able to configure it as part of the DR policy as well. Because right now it is undergoing auto provisioning. So direct sync is the goal, right? We have not done any stage syncs. So once this is finished, I can also show you how to change that if time permits. Now, this is with regards to the DR policy. Now, DR policy is basically deciding what intervals or what schedules your syncs are going to be run and what sync profiles are going to be associated with those servers. The next new change is the DR failover group. Now, as part of the failover group, you can specify sequence in which you would want your servers to fail over, right? Like for example, earlier we used to fail over the waves in a specific sequence to achieve the required boot order. Now for here, let's say I've got my failover group, which is priority 1. So whenever there is a disaster, this is the failover group. The servers which are part of this failover group, those need to fail over first. So again, I can add my servers based on the tags, right? So this is my server, which is based on the tag, right? I can apply this filter and then add that server to my particular failover group, right? So for now, if I just create it, okay. So when I create a failover group, I can also specify, I'll just go back here. I can also specify, the boot delay, failover profile, and fallback profile. So again, any sync profile that you want explicitly to be applicable only for failover, only for fallback, I can do that. Now let me just try and add this server, although it does not have any stage sync associated with it, and that's why it is not kind of allowing me to do that. But when we add a server with staged syncs, we will be able to allocate a failover profile that we need, and you see here the boot delay, right? So even within this failover group, if there are servers that must come up first, followed by other servers in sequence, you can specify the boot order or boot delay according to it. So I know that my server, my let's say my middleware server requires nearly 10 minutes for the sync to finish, and then I want my web or app server. So I can add the boot delay accordingly, and I can also specify the tiers for those servers. So all of this flexibility is now available to you as part of the failover group. And once you have created the failover group, you can perform failover and fallback by a click of a button here, just as we used to do earlier at the wave level. So once a server is part of the failover group, performing the failover and fallback is here. And again, in there as well, you get a lot of options, whether you want to override the boot order, you want to override the boot delay, and what sync policy or what sync profile you want to associate. So all of that you can do here. So whenever you want to do the failover, you can simply click the failover button. You can either do it for specific servers, for all tagged servers, or at the wave level. All of that is possible. A successful failover will show this failover as complete, and the fallback button gets activated. And if at all you would want to perform the fallback or failover again, you can just finish. There is also a new button which says complete failover. So after the failover is complete from RMM's perspective, and also the network infra side of things are taken care of by corresponding SMEs, you can then go ahead and proceed, mark this failover as complete by clicking this complete failover button. And then again, whenever you want to perform fallback, just hit the fallback button. Again, you will get the flexibility to specify the sync profile of your choice, how you want the boot order to be done. All of those options you will be able to provide as part of the fallback as well. And once you do that, RMM will fall back and copy all the data from your DR compute instances to the production. So these are the changes with regards to the DR policy, being able to create different schedules, with regards to the failover group, being able to create different failover groups based on the priorities in which you want to do the failover, boot orders, and a variety of other inputs. Next, image restore backup. That's the same stuff that we had in 7.4. So you have the images captured, you then create retention policies on top of it. So here under backup retention policies, you can create retention policies, give your policy a name. So you get a policy one, the short-term interval, short-term window, long-term interval, long-term window. So based on this, RMM will create and retain the image versions, or you simply want to do it by count, how many versions I want to. So once you configure this, associate with a particular image, you will start seeing multiple image versions based on the sync periodicity and the retention policy. And then it will also allow you to restore to the primary, restore to the destination, do single file restore. All of those options will be available just as we had in the earlier option. Now, as part of this new GUI, you also get the assessment, right? So we enable the analysis. Now you get assessment over here. And as part of assessment, it gives you additional information about the source server, right? So the earlier tabs that we went on with, so the dependency information, it keeps on getting populated as more and more data is getting collected. So is the analysis data, right? So it keeps on getting updated because we are collecting more samples and applying the analysis algorithms on top of it. So as part of assessment, again, you can also do cost estimation. You can do a host report, right? So host report will be basically all the assessment information that we see on the UI. You will be able to have it as part of the CSV reports, having different worksheets, and you can apply your own filters on top of it. Cost estimation is where you will be able to get a cost estimate of what cost you will incur if you run similar resources. Then wave plan will put together the servers based on their dependencies so that you can then just hit the play button and get started with migration. So all of this is available to you as part of assessment. Again, of course, the configuration for cloud users, whenever we are doing auto provisioning, we need to add a cloud user. That all remains the same. So for adding a cloud user, click on this add cloud user button. and then you specify the inputs that you need. So basically, my provider is, let's say, Google Cloud. So all the inputs that I need, I can just make use of the metadata associated with the VM, or provide the JSON file, other inputs. So you specify that, make sure the required prereqs are in place, and the cloud user will be added. So rest everything remains the same as we had in our earlier versions. So that was a quick overview of the new graphical user interface, how you configure things for adding the server to the wave, adding a server to the RMM, which basically also does discover by itself, how you associate different options with your server so that when you are performing the operation, you need not reconfigure it. Like in here, we looked at RMM making use of auto provisioning. The cloud user was associated this, and we asked RMM to do pre-provisioning. It's a sync type. So if you edit it, you can modify the sync types to staged syncs, right? So all of these inputs you can provide. We looked at the various tabs in here, how you configure the auto provision environment, how you add the sync profiles, right? These are the new things that we looked at. We also looked at the disaster recovery workflow. So creating the DR policies, creating different schedules, giving a lot of flexibility, associating the sync profiles, creating failover groups, and then just doing the failover and fallback for those servers. So this is all the flexibility that you get as part of the new graphical user interface. And again, like I said, we don't expect you to really get used to this UI right away. And that is where, we will be working as a team with you, making sure you get the right documentation, making sure you get the right hand holding so that you know how to achieve the use cases that we were earlier doing on 7.4, how to do that on 7.7 UI. All right, then. So with that done, I'll hand it over back to you, Alan, for the closing notes. And if there are any unanswered questions, I'll also take a look at it. I'm sure Ganesh must have answered those, but I'll just review them once. So back to you, Alan. Alan, you may be on mute.
Yeah, sorry guys, I was on mute. Yeah, look, and obviously taking away from today's session, right? It's hopefully that was insightful and to some of the changes. We're more than happy to have dedicated sessions as well for you and your teams. Of course, if you guys want to implement this in a POC, the 7.7 version, just reach out to me directly. We will be sending the recording after this session. I'll also potentially forward the decks as well that we discussed. But look, we are here to support you on these projects. The ultimate goal is to close these together and make it a successful win, whether that's us providing further demonstrations, like I said, proof of concept licenses. Yeah, so to that, Akash, thank you very much. And I was looking at the questions. I believe that there was a couple of questions in there. If there is any further questions, now I'll leave the session open here for the remaining 10 or so minutes. If there is any further questions, or please do reach out to me directly, and we'd be happy to answer anything there that we didn't cover on the call today. So thanks, Ganesh, and thank you, Akash.
Sure. Thanks, Alan, Ganesh. Thanks everyone for attending the session.
Thank you, everyone.